Daniel Martinez stood in the corridor outside the Galactic Council chamber, his jaw tight with tension. The message had arrived 3 hours ago, marked urgent and classified. The Council demanded his presence immediately. No explanation, no context, just a summons that felt more like an order than a request. Blake stood beside him, her diplomatic credentials displayed on her uniform. She had served as his senior advisor for 5 years, and Daniel trusted her judgment completely. Behind them, checked his data pad one more time, reviewing the latest reports from human colonies across the galaxy. They wouldn't call us here without consulting Earth first unless something serious happened, said quietly. Her voice carried worry that matched Daniel's own concerns. Daniel nodded. 15 years had passed since humanity joined the Galactic Council. 15 years of careful diplomacy, of proving Earth could be a responsible member of the galactic community. 15 years of being treated like children who needed constant supervision. The massive doors opened with a hiss of compressed air. The council chamber stretched before them, a circular room large enough to hold representatives from 300 different species. Holographic displays floated above each delegation's seat, showing real-time translations of every word spoken. The architecture was designed to impress, with crystalline pillars that reached toward a domed ceiling that displayed the stars themselves. High Chancellor occupied the central platform, his reptilian features impossible to read by human standards. His scales shifted between green and blue depending on his mood, a biological trait that Daniel had learned to interpret over the years. Right now, those scales showed confidence bordering on smugness. Ambassador Martinez's voice boomed through the chamber's speakers. "Thank you for responding to our summons so promptly." Daniel walked to the human delegation's platform, aware that hundreds of eyes from dozens of species watched his every move. The human section sat in the outer ring, far from the center where the founding species held their positions. Another reminder of humanity's junior status. "High Chancellor," Daniel replied, keeping his tone neutral. "Your message indicated an urgent matter requiring immediate attention. What has happened?" Scales rippled with what might have been amusement. The Council has made a decision regarding territorial disputes in the Outer Rim sectors, specifically concerning 3 worlds currently claimed by human colonists. Daniel felt his stomach drop. His hand tightened on her data pad, stepped closer as if physical proximity might somehow change what was about to happen. "We weren't informed of any territorial disputes," Daniel said carefully. "Which colonies are you referring to?" Council member Al, an avian species known for their vocal opposition to human expansion, spoke up from his perch, his feathers ruffled with obvious satisfaction. New Colorado, Settler's Hope, and Terra Nova. All 3 worlds sit in strategically important locations that the Empire requires for regional security. "Requires," Daniel's voice rose despite his attempts to stay calm. "Those are sovereign human worlds. Over 50,000 colonists live on those planets. They've been there for 8 years. "Precisely the problem," interrupted. "Human colonies lack proper military protection. The Council has determined that the Empire is better positioned to defend these territories. They have agreed to assume control of the worlds, ensuring stability in that sector." Daniel stared at the High Chancellor, unable to believe what he was hearing. "You're giving away human worlds without consulting Earth, without even informing us." "The decision has been made," Al said, his beak clicking in what Daniel had learned was the avian equivalent of a dismissive gesture. Young species often struggle to understand the complexities of galactic governance. The Council acts in the best interests of all member worlds. Stepped forward, her diplomatic training evident in every word. "With respect, High Chancellor, this violates multiple Council protocols. Member species have sovereignty over their own territories. Any dispute requires negotiation and mutual agreement before action." Scales darkened slightly, showing irritation. Ambassador Blake, humanity has been part of this council for barely 15 years. Many species here have maintained membership for thousands of years. We understand how these matters work far better than you do. Then help us understand, Daniel said, forcing himself to sound reasonable even as rage built inside his chest. Explain how the Council justifies taking sovereign human territory and giving it to another empire without our consent. A dozen Council members spoke at once, their voices creating a cacophony of alien languages that the translation system struggled to process. When order returned, raised one clawed hand for silence. The Empire has superior military forces in that region, he explained, his tone suggesting he was speaking to a slow child. Human vessels are few and inadequately armed. If conflict arises in the Outer Rim, your colonies would be defenseless. The Council cannot allow such vulnerability to threaten regional stability. So strengthen our presence there, suggested. Allow us to station more ships, build better defenses. Al laughed a harsh cawing sound. With what fleet? Humanity possesses what 40 vessels, 50, the deploy thousands. You are in no position to defend anything. Daniel felt's hand on his arm, a silent warning to maintain control. He took a deep breath, considering his options. Every instinct screamed at him to fight, to reject this decision with every tool at his disposal. But diplomacy required patience, required playing the long game. When does this transfer of authority take effect? He asked. The fleet will arrive at New Colorado within the week, said. Colony administrators should prepare for a peaceful transition. The Council expects full cooperation from human authorities. And if we refuse? Daniel asked quietly. The chamber fell silent. Scales shifted to deep blue, a color Daniel had learned indicated genuine anger. That would be most unwise, Ambassador Martinez. The Council's decision is final. Attempting to resist would only result in unnecessary conflict. Surely you don't want to be responsible for bloodshed over a simple administrative adjustment. Administrative adjustment, Daniel repeated, his voice flat. You're taking sovereign worlds from their rightful government and calling it an administrative adjustment. We are ensuring galactic stability, Al corrected. Something humanity should appreciate, given your species' troubled history with warfare. Perhaps if you had proven yourselves more capable, the Council might have more confidence in your ability to defend your claims. Gripped Daniel's arm harder now, sensing how close he was to saying something that couldn't be unsaid. Had gone pale, his hand hovering near his communications device as if desperate to contact Earth Command immediately. Seemed to sense the tension. His scales lightened slightly, taking on what might have been a conciliatory tone. Ambassador Martinez, I understand this news is difficult, but the Council has made its decision with the greater good in mind. Humanity is still learning its place in the galactic community. Trust that we know what is best. Daniel looked around the chamber at the hundreds of species represented there. Some watched with obvious sympathy. Others showed only indifference or poorly concealed amusement. A few seemed genuinely uncomfortable with what had just happened. But none of them spoke up. None of them challenged the decision. Humanity stood alone. Is there anything else, High Chancellor? Daniel asked, his voice carefully neutral. Only that we expect your cooperation in making this transition smooth, replied. The Council appreciates humanity's understanding in this matter. Daniel nodded once, then turned and walked toward the exit, and followed immediately, both smart enough to wait until they were clear of the chamber before speaking. The doors closed behind them, with a finality that felt like a death sentence. Daniel began, but he held up one hand. Not here, back to quarters. Secure channel to Earth Command. They walked quickly through the station's corridors, past aliens of every description. Some nodded in greeting. Others ignored them. Business as usual on Central Hub Station, even as humanity's world had just shifted beneath their feet. Inside his quarters, Daniel activated the secure communication system and entered his personal authorization codes. Within minutes, he had a direct line to Earth's leadership. "They did it," he said without preamble. "They're taking 3 colonies and giving them to the no negotiation, no discussion, it's already decided." The silence on the other end lasted for several long seconds. Then came the response he had been hopping for, the authorization he needed. Daniel closed the connection and looked at and both of them understood what was about to happen. Both of them knew that everything was about to change. "We go back tomorrow," Daniel said quietly, "and we end this." Council chamber filled with representatives from across the galaxy. Word had spread that the human envoy requested an emergency session, and curiosity brought even those species who rarely attended regular meetings. Most expected entertainment. The young human species would formally accept the council's decision, probably with some emotional speech about cooperation and understanding. Daniel Martinez walked through the entrance wearing his full diplomatic uniform, medals and honors displayed across his chest. Behind him came Blake and Captain Brandon Wright, both in military dress uniforms that few council members had seen before. The sight created a ripple of confusion through the assembled delegates. High Chancellor watched from his central platform, his scales showing mild irritation at having his schedule disrupted. "Ambassador Martinez, the Council recognizes your request to speak. Please proceed." Daniel walked to the speaking platform, his footsteps echoing in the massive chamber. He looked around slowly, meeting the eyes of as many delegates as possible. Some looked back with sympathy. Most showed indifference or barely concealed amusement. 15 years ago, humanity joined this council, Daniel began, his voice calm and measured. "We came in peace, hopping to find friendship among the stars. We believed in the principles this council claims to represent: justice, cooperation, mutual respect." Al ruffled his feathers impatiently. "Ambassador, if you called this session merely to give a speech about ideals, I must remind you that many of us have important duties elsewhere." Daniel ignored the interruption. In those 15 years, humanity has contributed to 17 peacekeeping missions. We have shared our medical knowledge freely, asking nothing in return. We have opened our markets to galactic trade, even when doing so hurt Earth's economy. We have tried at every turn to be good members of this community. "Yes, yes," another council member called out. "Humanity has been adequate for such a young species. What is your point?" "My point," Daniel said, his tone hardening, "is that despite everything we've done, this council has treated us like ignorant children who need to be managed. Our trade requests are without explanation. Our territorial claims are questioned at every turn. Our votes in council matters are dismissed as irrelevant." Scales darkened. "Ambassador Martinez, every young species faces challenges as they learn to navigate galactic politics. Your complaints are noted, but hardly justify disrupting council business." "I'm not finished," Daniel said sharply. "Yesterday, this council made a decision to give away 3 human worlds. 50,000 human citizens will be placed under foreign authority without their consent. When I objected, I was told that humanity lacks the strength to defend our own territory, that we should be grateful for the council's wisdom." Murmurs spread through the chamber. Some delegates shifted uncomfortably. Others leaned forward with increased interest. Stepped up beside Daniel, activating a holographic display that showed images of the 3 colonies. Children playing in parks on New Colorado. Farmers harvesting crops on Settler's Hope. Scientists conducting research on Terra Nova. "These are not abstract territories on a star chart," Daniel continued. "These are homes, families, lives that this council has decided to trade away like bargaining chips in some political game." "The decision was made for the greater good," Al protested. "Regional stability requires difficult choices." "Difficult for whom?" Daniel demanded. Not for you, sitting safely on your, not for the Empire, gaining territory without having to negotiate for it. Difficult only for the humans who will lose everything because this council decided they don't matter enough to protect. Raised his voice, trying to regain control of the session. Ambassador Martinez, these emotional appeals change nothing. The council has spoken. The matter is closed. No, Daniel said quietly. The matter is not closed. The chamber went silent. Daniel reached into his uniform pocket and removed a small data chip. He held it up for all to see. This contains formal documentation from Earth's government. As of this moment, humanity officially rejects the Galactic Council's authority to make decisions regarding human territory. The annexation of New Colorado, Settlers' Hope, and Terra Nova is hereby declared an illegal act of aggression. Gasps echoed through the chamber. Scales flashed between multiple colors, showing shock and rage. You cannot simply reject council authority. That is not how this works. You're right, Daniel agreed. That's not how it should work. Legitimate authority requires consent of the governed. This council lost any claim to authority over humanity the moment you decided to give away our worlds without asking us. Al stood up on his perch, feathers fully extended in obvious agitation. This is madness. You cannot stand against the entire council. Your fleet numbers fewer than 50 ships. The alone could crush any resistance you attempt. Daniel smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Is that what you think, that humanity only has 50 ships? He nodded to Brandon, who activated another holographic display. Numbers and statistics filled the air above the speaking platform. Ship classifications, weapon specifications, fleet deployment data. The chamber erupted into chaos as council members realized what they were seeing. Impossible, someone shouted. Humans lack the industrial capacity for such production. We don't lack capacity, said clearly. We lacked motivation to reveal what we were truly capable of building. Every trade restriction you placed on us forced us to develop our own technologies. Every dismissal of our military capabilities encouraged us to prepare in secret. You taught us not to trust the Council to protect human interests, so we learned to protect ourselves. A hologram flickered to life above Daniel's head. Admiral appeared, standing on what was clearly a military vessel's command deck. Behind her, dozens of crew members worked at various stations, all wearing Earth Defense Fleet uniforms. This is Admiral, Commander of the Earth Defense Fleet, the hologram announced. As of 0800 hours this morning, all EDF vessels have been mobilized and are moving to defensive positions around human colonies. Any hostile approach will be met with force. The chamber descended into complete disorder. Council members shouted questions and demands. Some called for immediate military action against humanity. Others demanded explanations for how Earth had hidden such extensive military development. Slammed his hand against his podium, creating a booming sound that eventually restored some measure of order. Ambassador Martinez, do you understand what you are doing? This is a declaration of war against the entire Galactic Council. No, Daniel corrected. This is a declaration that humanity will defend itself. The Empire wants our colonies. They are welcome to try taking them. But I promise you, High Chancellor, they will pay a price that makes them question whether 3 small worlds are worth the cost. You are outnumbered, Al insisted. Even with more ships than we suspected, you cannot stand against the combined might of the Council. Daniel turned to face Al directly. Perhaps you're right. Perhaps humanity will lose if this becomes a full-scale war. But I guarantee you this. We will make it so expensive, so bloody, so devastating that every species in this council will regret the day they decided human lives were expendable. He looked back at 15 years we've tried to earn your respect through cooperation, through contribution, through patience. None of it mattered. You still treated us like primitives who should be grateful for whatever scraps you chose to throw our way. Spoke up again, her voice carrying clearly across the now quiet chamber. So here's what happens next. The fleet can turn around and go home. They can forget about New Colorado, Settlers Hope, and Terra Nova. If they do that, we will consider the matter closed. And if they don't, a council member called out. Daniel's expression went cold. Then we consider their approach an act of war, and we respond accordingly. Every ship that enters human territory will be engaged and destroyed. If they want our worlds badly enough to fight for them, we will give them the fight of their lives. This is your final position, asked, his voice tight with barely controlled anger. You would risk war over 3 colonies. We would risk war to defend the principle that human lives matter, Daniel replied. That humanity deserves the same rights and protections as any other council member. If they attack our colonies, and the council allows it or supports it, then you prove that we were right to reject your authority. He gestured to Brandon, who began broadcasting the entire conversation to every major news network across council space. Within minutes, billions of beings across hundreds of worlds would hear humanity's declaration. You wanted to know what humanity is capable of, Daniel said to the assembled council. You wanted to test our strength, our resolve. Congratulations. You're about to find out exactly what happens when you push humans too far. Admiral's hologram spoke one more time. Any vessel approaching human territory without clearance will be treated as hostile. This is not a threat. This is a promise. Earth stands ready to defend its people by any means necessary. The hologram faded. Daniel looked around the chamber one final time, seeing shock and disbelief on almost every face. Some delegates appeared frightened. Others looked furious. A few seemed almost impressed. We came to the stars in peace, Daniel said quietly. We hoped to find friends and allies. Instead, you taught us that the universe respects strength, not kindness. So be it. From this moment forward, humanity takes its place in the galaxy not as supplicants seeking approval, but as equals who will defend their rights with every resource at their disposal. He turned and walked toward the exit, and Brandon followed immediately, their military boots striking the floor in perfect rhythm. The sound echoed through the absolute silence of the chamber. Behind them, 300 species sat stunned, trying to process what had just happened. Humanity had declared war. Not just against the Empire, but against the very structure of galactic politics that had dismissed them for 15 years. The young species that everyone expected to submit had instead chosen to fight. And across the galaxy, on countless worlds and stations and ships, beings who had never given humanity much thought suddenly began to wonder if they had seriously misjudged these strange creatures from Earth. Daniel reached the corridor outside the chamber and allowed himself one deep breath. There was no going back now. Within days, maybe hours, the fleet would arrive at New Colorado. Then everyone would discover whether humanity's declaration was backed by genuine strength, or if it was simply the desperate bluff of a species that had finally been pushed beyond endurance. Either way, the galaxy would never look at humanity the same way again. Admiral stood on the bridge of the EDS Defiance, watching tactical displays that showed the deployment of every human ship in the sector. Numbers scrolled across screens showing distances, weapons status, fuel reserves, and crew readiness. Everything had to be perfect. Humanity would only get one chance to prove themselves. Admiral, all ships report ready status, Commander Mitchell announced from his tactical station. He was young for his position, barely 30, but he had earned his place through skill and dedication. Fleet Formation Gamma 7 is in position around New Colorado. Nodded, her eyes never leaving the main display. She had spent 20 years in Earth's military, working her way up from a junior officer to fleet commander. She knew what was at stake. Every calculation had to be exact. Every decision had to be right. Across the galaxy, The news of humanity's declaration spread faster than any previous broadcast in Council history. Within 6 hours, every major government knew that the human envoy had rejected Council authority and threatened war. Reactions varied wildly depending on who you asked. On Earth, in the underground command center beneath Geneva, Ambassador Foster coordinated responses to hundreds of incoming messages. Some Council species offered quiet support, though none were willing to say so publicly. Others demanded explanations or threatened sanctions. The Empire sent only a brief message promising that humanity would regret their defiance. Rubbed her tired eyes and reached for another cup of coffee. She had been awake for 30 hours straight, managing communications while Daniel made his declaration at the Council. Now came the hard part, making sure Earth's government stayed united behind the decision to fight. Ambassador Foster, we have the colony governors on secure channel, her assistant called out. They're requesting status updates. Activated the communication link. 3 faces appeared on her screen, representing the leadership of New Colorado, Settlers Hope, and Terra Nova. All 3 looked worried but determined. Governor Davis of New Colorado spoke first. Ambassador Foster, our militia forces are ready. We've got about 2,000 volunteers with military training, plus whatever weapons we've managed to stockpile. It's not much against an Empire fleet, but we'll fight if they come. Governor Davis, the defense fleet is taking up positions around your world right now, assured him. You won't have to face them alone. Admiral has her best ships protecting New Colorado. With respect, Ambassador, we've seen the reports, Governor Martinez of Settlers Hope said. Her face showed the stress of the situation. They have hundreds of ships. Even if Admiral has twice as many vessels as the Council thinks, we're still outnumbered. Chose her words carefully. Governor Martinez, humanity has advantages they don't expect. Trust Admiral, trust the fleet, and most importantly, trust that Earth will never abandon its people. The third governor, Robert Hayes of Terra Nova, leaned forward on his screen. We trust you, Ambassador. Just tell us straight. Do we have a real chance, or are we about to watch our homes get destroyed? We have more than a chance, said firmly. We have preparation, training, and technology that the Council doesn't know about. They think they're coming to claim undefended colonies. They're about to learn that humans defend what's ours. Meanwhile, in the depths of space near the Emperor Hun sat in his throne room receiving reports from his military commander. General X stood at attention, his 4 arms folded in the formal position of respect that protocol required. Your Imperial Majesty, the human declaration appears to be genuine, X reported. They have mobilized their fleet and taken defensive positions around the disputed colonies. Emperor Hun's face plates shifted in what might have been amusement. His species communicated emotion through color changes in their armored skin, and right now he displayed the pale blue of confidence. So the humans wish to play at war. How many ships do they have in position? Initial scans show approximately 40 vessels, Your Majesty, mostly destroyers and cruisers. Nothing that poses a threat to our battle fleet. And our forces? 120 ships, including 15 heavy cruisers and 3 dreadnoughts. The humans are outnumbered 3-1, and we possess superior firepower in every category. The Emperor stood, his armored form towering over even his tall general. The Council has given us permission to take those worlds. The humans had their chance to submit peacefully. Now we will teach them the cost of defying the Empire. Should we offer terms, Your Majesty, perhaps allow them to withdraw with honor? No, Hun said flatly. They made their declaration in front of the entire Council. They humiliated us by suggesting we should fear their primitive fleet. We will crush their ships, occupy their colonies, and prove to the galaxy that humanity's boldness was nothing but empty posturing. General X bowed deeply. As you command, Your Majesty, the fleet will depart within the hour. Back on the council station, High Chancellor convened an emergency meeting with the most powerful species in the council. The circular table held representatives from a dozen major governments, all trying to understand how a situation that seemed simple 2 days ago had turned into a potential war. "The will not back down," Ambassador of the Collective stated. His species looked almost humanoid, but with crystalline skin that refracted light in multiple colors. Emperor Hun views this as a matter of imperial honor. If he retreats now, it makes him look weak. "And the humans?" asked Representative Era of the Harmony Coalition. Her species resembled tall, slender beings covered in soft fur, known for their diplomatic skills. "Will they truly fight?" Scales showed deep purple, the color of profound concern. "I believe they will." Ambassador Martinez was not bluffing. "The question is whether they have the capability to back up their threats." "They claim to have more ships than we thought," noted. "But claims are easy. Battle will reveal the truth." Era looked troubled. "Perhaps we should intervene. Demand both sides stand down before this escalates into real violence." "The Council has already made its decision," replied. "To reverse course now would make us appear weak and indecisive. They have our authorization. If humanity wants to challenge that, they must face the consequences." In space, the fleet assembled. 120 warships, gleaming in the light of their home star, prepared for what their crews expected to be a short and decisive victory. Most of the crew members had never faced human opponents. They knew Earth's reputation for internal warfare from historical records, but assumed that centuries of space travel had civilized the species. General X stood on the command deck of his flagship, the Eternal Glory. Around him, officers monitored systems and confirmed readiness. Everything proceeded according to plan. "All ships report ready, General," his second officer announced. "Course is laid in for New Colorado. At maximum speed, we will arrive in 36 hours. "Begin the jump," X ordered, "and broadcast a message to the human fleet. Tell them they have one final chance to withdraw before we arrive. After that, any ship remaining in the system will be destroyed." The fleet activated their faster-than-light drives and vanished into the void between stars. 36 hours to prepare. 36 hours for both sides to make final preparations. 36 hours for humanity to prove whether their bold declaration was backed by real strength. On the Defiance, Admiral received notification that the fleet had departed. She studied the intelligence reports, analyzing their likely approach vectors and tactical doctrine. The fought according to 1,000 years of military tradition, organized, disciplined, and overwhelmingly powerful. Humans fought differently. "Commander Mitchell, prepare the fleet for combat operations," ordered. "I want every ship running constant drills. Navigation, weapons, damage control, everything needs to be perfect." "Yes, Admiral," acknowledged. "What about the message? They're offering us a chance to withdraw." Smiled grimly. "Send them a reply. Tell them that New Colorado is human territory and any hostile approach will be met with force. Keep it simple and clear." Drafted the message and sent it. The die was cast. Both sides had committed to their positions. Now it was just a matter of time before they met in battle. On New Colorado, Governor Davis watched the sky from his office window. Somewhere up there, beyond the atmosphere and the planet's 2 moons, the Earth Defense Fleet waited. 40 ships against 120. He had seen the numbers. He knew the odds. But he also knew humans. He had served in Earth's military before coming to New Colorado. He understood that humans didn't always fight fair, and they rarely fought the way their enemies expected. His communicator chimed. "Governor, this is Captain Lisa Morgan of the Colonial Militia. All units are in position. Whatever happens, we're ready to defend our homes." "Thank you, Captain," replied. "Let's hope it doesn't come to ground fighting, but if it does, make sure everyone knows we don't quit, not ever." Back on Earth, Daniel Martinez sat in a secure room watching news reports from across the galaxy. Some species condemned humanity's aggression. Others quietly admired their courage, even if they wouldn't say so publicly. A few began placing bets on how long human ships would last against the fleet. Entered the room carrying a data pad. Latest intelligence from our sources inside Council space. Several species are pressuring to negotiate. They're worried this could escalate beyond control. Will he listen? Daniel asked. Doubtful. The Council staked their authority on this decision. Backing down now makes them look weak. Daniel nodded slowly. Then we finish what we started. Admiral knows what to do, we just have to trust her. 30 hours passed. Then 32. The fleet drew closer to New Colorado, their approach detected by long-range sensors. Admiral watched the tactical display, seeing enemy ships represented by red icons moving steadily toward the green icons of her own fleet. Admiral, they'll arrive in 4 hours, reported. Their formation suggests standard assault pattern, heavy cruisers in the vanguard, destroyers spread wide to prevent flanking, dreadnoughts in reserve. Predictable, murmured. They're fighting by the book, that's good for us. We're still outnumbered 3-1, Admiral. Looked at her tactical officer and smiled. Remember what I told you during training. That humans don't fight fair. No, corrected. That humans fight to win. There's a difference. 3 hours left, 2 hours, 1 hour. The fleet emerged from faster-than-light travel at the edge of the New Colorado system. General X immediately ordered scans of the entire area, looking for the human fleet. His sensors officer called out, "General, we have contacts. 42 human vessels positioned around the planet's third moon." Only 42. X felt satisfaction ripple through his thoughts. They sent everything they had and it's still not enough. Open a channel to all ships. Prepare for battle formation. Behind New Colorado's moon, Admiral sat in her command chair watching the same sensor data. The fleet was exactly where she expected, moving in exactly the formation she predicted. "All ships, this is Admiral," she broadcast on the fleet channel. "The enemy has arrived. Remember your training, trust your crews, and show them what humans can do." She looked at Execute Operation Thunder. The battle was about to begin. The Earth Defense Fleet emerged from behind New Colorado's moon in perfect formation. Admiral watched her tactical display as 42 human ships spread across the space between the Armada and the colony world. On paper, the numbers looked terrible. In reality, had advantages that General X couldn't possibly understand. "Enemy fleet is holding position at the system's edge," Commander Mitchell reported from his station. "They're scanning us, probably trying to assess our capabilities." "Let them look," said calmly. "Communication officer, open a channel to the flagship." A moment later, General X's face appeared on the main screen. His armored features showed the pale blue color of confidence, almost bordering on arrogance. Behind him, could see his command crew working at their stations. "Human Admiral," X began, his voice carrying the formal tone of military protocol. "I am General X of the Imperial Fleet. Your vessels are outnumbered and this is your final opportunity to withdraw. Surrender the colonies peacefully and no blood will be shed." Leaned forward in her chair. "General X, I am Admiral of the Earth Defense Fleet. New Colorado, Settlers Hope, and Terra Nova are sovereign human territory. Your presence here constitutes an act of war. You have one opportunity to turn your fleet around and leave this system. If you do not, we will consider your continued presence a hostile act and respond accordingly." X's color shifted slightly, showing surprise at the human's boldness. "Admiral, you command 42 vessels. I command 120, including ships that individually your entire fleet. Your bravery is admirable but foolish." "Is that your final answer, General?" "It is. I will give you 10 minutes to begin your withdrawal." After that, my orders are to secure these worlds by whatever force is necessary. His expression didn't change. Then we have nothing more to discuss. Out. The screen went dark. Turned to look at her, his young face showing concern despite his training. Admiral, he's not bluffing about their firepower. Those dreadnoughts alone could probably handle half our fleet. Probably, agreed. If we fought the way they expect us to fight. Communication officer, signal to all ships. Execute Operation Thunder on my mark. Across the human fleet, captains received their orders. On the EDS Valiant, Captain Stone reviewed his mission parameters one final time. His ship was a destroyer, fast and maneuverable but lightly armored compared to cruisers. The traditional approach would be to engage at long range and hope to survive. Had no intention of fighting traditionally. Weapons confirm that the railgun systems are charged and ready, he ordered. His weapons officer, Lieutenant Melissa Harper, worked her console with practiced efficiency. All railguns showing green, Captain. Electromagnetic pulse generators are online. Drone systems are ready for deployment. Good, remember we get one surprise attack. Make it count. 8 minutes passed. The fleet began moving forward, their formation organized and precise. General X watched his tactical display with satisfaction. The humans held their position, which meant they intended to fight. Foolish, but it would make the battle shorter. All ships advance to engagement range, X ordered. Target the larger human vessels first. I want this finished quickly. The massive warships moved forward, their engines creating brilliant flares of light against the darkness of space. 120 ships, all of them confident in their technological superiority and numerical advantage. On the Defiance, Admiral watched them come. She had studied tactics for months, reviewing every battle they had fought in the past century. They favored direct engagement, trusting their shields and armor to absorb enemy fire while their superior weapon systems destroyed opposing forces. It was a strategy that worked well against opponents who fought the same way. Humans had different ideas about warfare. All ships mark, ordered quietly. The human fleet exploded into motion. Rather than holding formation and trading shots at long range, the Earth ships accelerated toward the fleet at speeds that shocked the enemy commanders. But they didn't charge directly forward. Instead, they split into small groups, each one targeting different sections of the formation. What are they doing? X demanded. They're breaking formation, they'll be destroyed piecemeal. His tactical officer studied the scanner data. General, they're moving far faster than our intelligence suggested. Their acceleration profiles are beyond what we expected. The first human ships reached engagement range. Rather than slowing to exchange fire, they accelerated even more, diving into the gaps between vessels. The EDS Valiant, with Stone in command, led a squadron of 5 destroyers directly toward a cluster of enemy cruisers. All weapons fire on my mark, ordered. His ship screamed through space, weaving between enemy vessels before they could properly target him. Mark. The Valiant's rail guns fired. Unlike energy weapons that could be deflected by shields, the railgun projectiles were solid metal accelerated to incredible speeds through electromagnetic force. They punched through the shields like they weren't even there, slamming into hull armor with devastating effect. The lead cruiser shuddered as 3 railgun rounds tore through its forward section. Explosions rippled across its hull. Before it could respond, the Valiant was already past, targeting another ship. Direct hits, Melissa reported. Enemy vessel is venting atmosphere. They're falling out of formation. Across the battlefield, the same scene repeated itself dozens of times. Human ships darted between enemy vessels, firing weapons they hadn't expected, then moving away before return fire could land. The organized formation began to break apart as ships tried to track targets moving in 3 dimensions simultaneously. They're using the debris field, called out on the Defiance. Look, those three destroyers just used the destroyed ship's wreckage as cover. Nodded. Humans have been fighting in 3 dimensions since we first went to sea. They think in terms of traditional formation warfare. We think in terms of whatever gives us an advantage. A dreadnought, massive and powerful, turned its heavy weapons toward a cluster of human ships. The crew prepared to fire a salvo that would destroy the smaller vessels. Before they could shoot, 4 human frigates appeared from an unexpected angle, having circled around using the moon's gravity to mask their approach. Electromagnetic pulse now, the lead frigate's commander ordered. The pulse generators fired, creating a wave of electromagnetic energy that washed over the dreadnought. Its shields flickered and died. Its weapons systems went offline. For 30 seconds, the massive ship was defenseless. That was all the time the human ships needed. Railgun fire and missile strikes slammed into the dreadnought's exposed hull. Explosions blossomed along its entire length. When the electromagnetic pulse faded and systems came back online, the dreadnought was crippled, drifting helplessly as emergency crews tried to contain the damage. General X stared at his tactical display in growing horror. Red icons representing destroyed or crippled ships across the screen. In less than 30 minutes of fighting, he had lost 27 vessels. The human fleet, meanwhile, showed only minor damage to 3 ships. "How is this possible?" he demanded. "They're primitives. They've only been in space for a few centuries." His tactical officer's voice shook slightly. "General, they're not fighting like any species we've encountered. They use no standard formations. They coordinate in ways our sensors can barely track, and their weapons ignore our defensive systems." Another explosion rocked the fleet as a human destroyer took out 2 cruisers with a perfectly coordinated strike. The ships were trying to return fire, but hitting the fast-moving human vessels proved nearly impossible. When they did land hits, the human ship's armor absorbed more damage than expected. On the Defiance coordinated the fleet's movements with precision. "Squadron 3, you have an opening on the enemy's right flank. Squadron 5, fall back and recharge your systems. Squadron 7, cover them." "Enemy flagship is attempting to withdraw," the tactical officer called out. Studied the display. General X was pulling his command ship back, trying to reorganize what remained of his fleet. She considered pressing the attack but decided against it. "All ships maintain defensive perimeter around the colony worlds," she ordered. "Do not pursue beyond the engagement zone." Stone received the order and felt both relief and disappointment. His ship had survived the battle with only minor damage, and his crew had performed perfectly. Part of him wanted to chase the fleeing enemy and finish them off, but orders were orders. "Bring us about," he commanded. "Return to formation." The human fleet regrouped, returning to their original positions between the fleet and New Colorado. On the planet's surface, Governor Davis and thousands of colonists watched the sensor displays, seeing their protectors return victorious. General X counted his losses: 27 ships destroyed, 15 more damaged badly enough they could barely maintain formation. His flagship had taken damage to its secondary systems. The dreadnought that was supposed to be unstoppable sat dead in space, a crippled wreck waiting to be salvaged. Against this, the humans had suffered the loss of 2 frigates and damage to perhaps a dozen other vessels. Nothing that prevented them from continuing to fight. "General, what are your orders?" his second officer asked quietly. X stared at the tactical display for a long moment. His color had shifted to dark red, the color of shame and defeat. The Emperor had sent him to crush human resistance. Instead, he had been crushed. "Signal all ships," he said slowly. "We are withdrawing." "The Emperor will demand an explanation, General." "Then I will give him one. I will tell him that humanity is not what we thought, that their ships are faster, their weapons more advanced, their tactics completely foreign to everything we understand about warfare." X turned away from the display. And I will tell him that if the Empire wants these colonies, he will need to send a far larger fleet. The Armada turned away from New Colorado. What remained of their once proud formation limped toward the system's edge, defeated and humiliated. On the Defiance, Admiral watched them go. She felt no joy in the victory, only relief that her fleet had survived. She had known the human ships were superior. She had trained her crews to fight with maximum efficiency. But war always carried risk, and she had gambled with the lives of thousands of people. Admiral, New Colorado is broadcasting, the communication officer reported. Governor Davis appeared on the screen. Admiral, on behalf of every person on New Colorado, thank you. You saved us. Just doing my job, Governor replied. How are your people? Scared but safe. We watched the whole battle. I've never seen anything like it. Neither have the said, and that's why we won. Across the galaxy, recordings of the battle spread like wildfire through Council networks. Every species with access to sensor data watched in stunned silence as human ships tore through a numerically superior force. Military analysts tried to understand how it happened. Diplomats scrambled to reassess humanity's position in galactic politics. On the Council station, High Chancellor sat alone in his private chambers, reviewing the battle footage. His scales showed colors he hadn't displayed in decades: uncertainty, fear, and grudging respect. Ambassador Blake, watching from her quarters on the station, allowed herself a small smile. Daniel had been right. Sometimes the only way to earn respect was to prove you deserved it. And humanity had just proven themselves in the most definitive way possible. 3 weeks after the battle, Daniel Martinez returned to the Galactic Council chamber. The atmosphere had changed completely from his last visit. Where before there had been dismissive amusement, now there was cautious respect. Where before guards had barely acknowledged him, now they stood at attention as he passed. Blake walked beside him, along with Captain Brandon Wright and 4 armed security officers. The council had requested diplomatic talks, but Daniel took no chances. Trust had to be rebuilt, and that would take time. The chamber was packed. Every major species had sent representatives, and many minor ones had come as well. The battle at New Colorado had changed everything. Suddenly, humanity wasn't the junior member to be managed. They were a power that had to be negotiated with. High Chancellor occupied his usual position, but his scales showed muted colors now. Gone was the confident blue from before. Instead, he displayed the neutral gray of someone choosing his words very carefully. Ambassador Martinez began. The Council welcomes you back. We have much to discuss. Daniel walked to the speaking platform without rushing. He took his time, letting the silence build, making it clear that he was here because he chose to be, not because he had been summoned. High Chancellor, Daniel replied. 3 weeks ago, I stood in this chamber and told you that humanity would defend its territory. You didn't believe me. The Empire didn't believe me. A lot of species represented here today didn't believe me. Murmurs rippled through the gathered delegates. Some looked uncomfortable. Others nodded in acknowledgement. Now we're back, Daniel continued. Not to ask for permission, not to seek approval, but to establish terms under which humanity might continue its relationship with this council. Council member Al, who had been so dismissive before, sat quietly on his perch. His feathers were pressed close to his body, a sign of submission in his species. He made no attempt to interrupt. Ambassador Era of the Harmony Coalition stood up. Her species had always been known for their diplomatic skills and peaceful nature. Ambassador Martinez, on behalf of my government and many others here today, I want to apologize. The Council made a grave error in judgment. We treated humanity unfairly and dismissed your legitimate concerns. Thank you, Ambassador Era, Daniel said. Your government has always been fair to humanity. I appreciate your words. Shifted on his platform. The Council has reviewed the events of the past 3 weeks. While we do not condone the military action taken, we acknowledge that our decision to authorize the annexation was made without proper consultation. Without proper consultation, Daniel repeated slowly. High Chancellor, you gave away 3 human worlds without asking us. That wasn't a lack of consultation. That was theft. The chamber went silent. No one challenged Daniel's characterization. Even species that normally defended the Council's authority stayed quiet. Nevertheless, continued, though his scales darkened slightly, the Council wishes to move forward constructively. We propose returning to the previous status, with humanity maintaining control of all its current territories. No, Daniel said flatly. Scales flashed with surprise. No. Returning to the previous status means returning to a situation where the Council treats humanity as a junior member whose concerns can be dismissed, Daniel explained. That's not acceptable anymore. Stepped forward, activating a holographic display. Ambassador Martinez has prepared a formal proposal outlining humanity's requirements for continued Council membership. I think you'll find the terms reasonable. The display showed a numbered list. Daniel began reading through it, his voice carrying clearly across the chamber. First, humanity demands full sovereignty over all human-settled worlds and any future colonies we establish. No Council decision can override human authority within human territory. Several delegates nodded. This was basic autonomy that most species enjoyed. Second, humanity requires equal voting rights in all Council matters. Our votes will carry the same weight as founding species, not reduced status as a junior member. This caused more murmurs. Founding species had always held privileged positions in Council votes, but after the battle at New Colorado, no one wanted to argue with humans about their status. Third, all discriminatory trade restrictions and technology embargoes currently imposed on humanity must be removed immediately. We will have full access to Council markets and research sharing programs. Ambassador Foster, watching via secure transmission from Earth, smiled at this one. The trade restrictions had always been the most frustrating part of Council membership. Now they would finally be lifted. Fourth, Daniel continued, the Empire will pay reparations to humanity for the attempted annexation. These reparations will cover the military costs of defending our colonies and provide compensation to colonists who suffered emotional distress during the crisis. A representative stood up, his armored features showing dark colors of anger. The Empire objects. We were acting under Council authority. Any reparations should come from the Council treasury, not Imperial funds. The Empire chose to send a fleet to attack human colonies, Daniel replied coldly. The Council may have authorized it, but you chose to execute it. You bear responsibility for your actions. Era spoke up again. Ambassador Martinez, your terms seem reasonable overall. However, the reparations amount listed here is quite substantial. Perhaps we could negotiate a smaller sum. Daniel shook his head. The amount is calculated based on actual costs incurred, plus compensation for the threat to 50,000 human lives. If the Empire finds the amount too high, they should have considered that before sending their fleet. The representative sat down, clearly unhappy but unwilling to push the issue. His empire had just lost 27 ships and suffered complete humiliation. Further argument would only make things worse. Fifth and finally, Daniel said, the Council will formally acknowledge that the attempted annexation was illegal under Council law and violated humanity's sovereignty. This acknowledgement will be entered into official records and broadcast across all Council networks. Scales shifted through several colors before settling on dark blue. Ambassador Martinez, that would be an unprecedented admission of error by the Council. We have never made such a formal acknowledgement. Then perhaps it's time you started, Daniel replied. Good governance requires admitting mistakes. The council made a mistake. Own it. The chamber erupted into discussion. Delegates argued with each other, some supporting humanity's terms, others objecting to various points. Called for order several times before the noise finally subsided. The council must deliberate on these proposals, announced. We will recess for 2 hours and then vote on each point individually. Take your time, Daniel said. But understand this. If the council rejects these terms, humanity will formally withdraw from council membership. We will maintain our sovereignty, defend our territories, and establish our own diplomatic relationships with species who treat us fairly. The choice is yours. He turned and walked out of the chamber, and the security detail followed immediately. Behind them, the council dissolved into chaos as delegates realized humanity was serious about leaving if their demands weren't met. 2 hours later, the council reconvened. Daniel returned to find the atmosphere noticeably different. Delegates who had seemed uncertain before now appeared resigned. The math was simple. Losing humanity as a member would hurt the council's prestige and reduce their economic power. Several species had already approached privately, promising support for human proposals. Called the chamber to order. The council has reviewed humanity's proposals. We will now vote on each point. The first vote passed nearly unanimously. Human sovereignty over human territory was confirmed. The second vote was closer, but still passed by a comfortable margin. Humanity would receive equal voting rights. The third vote also passed. Trade restrictions would be lifted immediately. The fourth vote regarding reparations faced more opposition, but ultimately the council voted in favor, with the empire abstaining. They would pay the price for their attempted conquest. The fifth vote took the longest. Many delegates argued against forcing the council to admit error so publicly, but finally, after heated debate, it passed by a narrow margin. The council would formally acknowledge their mistake. Looked exhausted as he announced the results. All 5 proposals have been approved. Ambassador Martinez, humanity's terms are accepted. Daniel allowed himself a brief moment of satisfaction before responding. Thank you, High Chancellor. On behalf of humanity, I accept the council's agreement. We look forward to a more equitable relationship going forward. Era stood up once more. Ambassador Martinez, if I may speak. Of course, Ambassador. I think many of us here today learned an important lesson, she said, looking around the chamber. We assumed that because humanity was young, they were weak. We assumed that because they sought peace, they would accept any terms we offered. We were wrong on both counts. She paused, letting her words sink in. Humanity came to the stars seeking friendship. We gave them dismissal and disrespect. They responded not with submission but with strength. Perhaps we should all remember that peaceful intentions do not mean passive acceptance of injustice. Several delegates nodded in agreement. Even scales showed the yellow color of acknowledgement. The scene shifted to New Colorado, where Governor Davis stood before a crowd of colonists gathered in the main settlement square. News of the council's decision had just reached the colony. The council has accepted Earth's terms, announced to cheers from the crowd. We are safe. Our homes are protected. Humanity has secured its place in the galaxy. The crowd erupted in celebration. People hugged each other, some crying with relief. Admiral, visiting the colony to oversee final repairs to the defense fleet, watched from the side with quiet pride. A young girl approached the Admiral, no more than 8 years old. Admiral, thank you for protecting us. Knelt down to the child's level. That's what we do. We protect our people, all of them. Back on Earth, in the command center beneath Geneva, Foster finally allowed herself to relax. She had been managing crisis communications for 3 weeks straight, coordinating with dozens of governments and species. Now it was over. Daniel's face appeared on her screen. We did it. You did it, she corrected. You stood in front of the entire council and refused to back down. I had help, Daniel replied. Admiral, you and millions of humans who were willing to fight if necessary. That's what made the difference. They saw we were united. On the council station, Blake stood in her quarters looking out at the stars. Other junior species had already started contacting her, asking for advice on how to negotiate better terms with the council. Humanity's victory had inspired them. She activated her communication system and sent a message to several of those species. If you want to be treated fairly, you have to be willing to stand up for your rights. The council respects strength, but that strength can take many forms. Sometimes it's military power. Sometimes it's economic leverage. Sometimes it's just the courage to say no when something is wrong. Messages came back quickly, thanking her for the advice and asking for continued dialogue. Realized that humanity's role in the galaxy had fundamentally changed. They weren't just protecting their own interests anymore. They were becoming a voice for other species who felt marginalized. Daniel returned to his quarters on the station, exhausted but satisfied. Brandon entered carrying a data pad. Sir, we're getting requests for formal alliances from 17 different species, Brandon reported. Most of them are smaller governments that have felt pushed around by the Council's founding members. Schedule meetings with all of them, Daniel decided. We came to the stars looking for friends. Maybe we just found them. 3 months later, Daniel stood in the council chamber once more. This time, he wasn't defending humanity's right to exist. He was proposing reforms to council governance that would give all junior species more representation and protect them from decisions made without consultation. The proposal passed with significant support. 6 months after that, the Earth Defense Fleet held joint military exercises with forces from 12 other species. Admiral watched with satisfaction as human and alien ships coordinated together, building trust through shared purpose. 1 year after the battle at New Colorado, Daniel attended a reception celebrating the anniversary. Representatives from across the galaxy came to mark the day that changed everything. Era approached him with a smile. Ambassador Martinez, I wanted to thank you. For what? For reminding us all that the principles the Council was founded on still matter: justice, fairness, respect for all species regardless of age or power. She raised her glass. To humanity and to the hope that your courage inspires in others. Daniel raised his own glass. To a galaxy where everyone is treated with dignity, where might doesn't make right, where peaceful species can thrive without fear. They drank together, surrounded by delegates from hundreds of worlds. The galaxy hadn't become perfect overnight. There were still conflicts and disagreements, but something fundamental had shifted. Humanity had proven that new voices deserved to be heard, that young species could stand equal to ancient ones, that patience and peace were not the same as weakness. Daniel looked around the room at aliens who had once dismissed him. Now they treated him as an equal. Some had even become genuine friends. The path to get here had been difficult, marked by conflict and risk, but it had been necessary. Humanity hadn't come to the stars seeking war. They had come seeking respect. And finally, after standing firm when it mattered most, they had earned it. The conversation flowed around him, multiple species discussing cooperation and mutual defense. Young species sought his advice. Older species acknowledged human contributions to council initiatives. Appeared at his side. 3 years ago I never would have imagined this. Imagined what? That we'd go from being dismissed as primitives to being seen as leaders. That our declaration of war would become a catalyst for reform across the entire council. Daniel smiled. We didn't set out to reform the council, we just wanted to protect our people. And in doing so, we showed everyone else how to protect theirs, replied. Daniel looked out through the transparent walls of the station at the stars beyond. Somewhere out there, human colonies thrived in safety. The Earth Defense Fleet patrolled their territories, respected by allies and feared by potential enemies. Humanity had found its place among the stars, not through conquest or submission, but through the courage to stand for what was right. The galaxy would never see them as primitives again. And that, Daniel thought, was exactly how it should be.